Welcome to Getting Your Ducks in a Row. I'm Jason Windle, and in today's episode, I'm joined by Chris Partington, Managing Director of Zebra Architects. Chris has been running his practice for 20 years, working on projects across the UK in the residential and leisure sectors. We dive into his journey in architecture, what it takes to build a successful firm, and the importance of ethics in the industry, the impact of post-Grenfell regulations, and what the future holds for the built environment. Chris shares some brilliant insights on leadership, client relationships, and how to navigate an ever-changing industry. Let's get into it. Chris, hello. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jason. How are you? You okay?
Very well, thank you.
Great.
Thank you for taking the time to come on this podcast. It's great to have people like you in your sort of position to gather some insights from.
Oh, you're welcome. No, pleasure to meet you, and hopefully we have a good chat.
I'm sure we will. So if we just start off, just for our listeners, just if you could introduce yourself and maybe give a bit of insight into your journey into architecture and into running the business and where it all started and where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Chris Partington. I'm Managing Director of Zebra Architects Limited. We're a RIBA chartered practice based in Worcester, and we service clients nationwide. So we've been as far east as Norwich, far south as was the English Channel, veer into Wales. We've got sites up in Manchester and Leeds, we've been as far as Glasgow and Edinburgh. So if there's a quid in it, we'll travel. So which is good. I think I'm hopefully just about still young enough to accommodate that. So I started the practice 20 years ago, 4th October 2004. Perfect timing. Just had a new baby, so why not start your own business? Prior to that, I was in private practice for a number of different architectural firms. I worked down in Bristol for a company which designed quite a lot of stadium work, which eventually brought me up to Worcester because they were looking for an architect to run the redevelopment for Worcester Warriors Rugby Club, Six Ways, and it was ready for the 1999 Rugby World Cup. So my wife and I travelled up to Worcester, and we thought, this is a nice little place. Let's settle here, and then you have kids, and suddenly it's your home. And so I was working in private practice then until 2004. I think I'd always had a slight itch to do something myself. I think they do say that the people who decide to run their own businesses are generally unemployable by anybody else, and I think you soon get to that point. And probably about 12 months before, I was working for a practice, and I was a little bit uneasy about the way they were running the practice, how they were dealing with their staff, and I thought, right, do you know what, I can do this my way. I always wanted to run a practice that I've always wanted to work at but never got the opportunity. And this was the opportunity to make it quite people-centric, and really just to have that understanding that people have a life outside of work. Everybody's got their different pressures, whether it's family pressures or what have you, even if it's just going to the dentist or the doctors or what have you, that actually you need to take little times in your day to sort out some of your personal bits and pieces. So it all came to a head with my previous employer, where it was my first child's first sports day at school, and I went up to my then boss and said, it's my daughter's first sports day. I'd really like to be there because it's quite a special moment. And he refused. And at that point, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I had a client who was quite close to at the point, and he said, I'll give you an opportunity if you want. He said, if nothing else, it prepays your mortgage for a year. So, there was very little jeopardy in doing it, really. Within 6 months, we had 3 people working for us, so we picked up some more stuff, and you build up relationships with people over time, don't you? And suddenly they find out where you are, and then they follow you, and it's very much about people. People buy from people rather than necessarily companies. So, so that was 2004. We had The recession of 2008, 2009, which was a lovely period to live through. Unfortunately, we had a lot of contractors go bust, a lot of developers go bust. We were very largely in the residential market at that point with some small regional developers. And again, as a young practice, 4 years old, we had quite a select number of clients who were quite small. So seeing them fall off the edge of a cliff was, there was a few sleepless nights. But then we started to get into the student accommodation sector. And a lot of the sites that we'd been working on to put 24 apartments, suddenly they were available to the student sector. They came knocking on the door, and we were back up and running again, really. So, we're a small practice. I think there's seven fee earners. We managed to turn out quite a lot of work in that time. And 20 years later, I like to think that we're still true to our core values, which is putting people first and invest in their education, support them in their lives, give flexibility to working, give flexibility to their day-to-day arrangements, and you get the best out of people. And staff retention is absolutely critical. So we tried to stay really true to our value. We have had some people leave over the years, and that's generally been to open their own practices, which is, it's sad at the time, but I think there's also a little bit of pride that you've gone, well, you've got them to this point, and it's exactly what I did. I left a practice to go, so why not, let them free, and we are. We do some collaborative working with them as well now, which is nice. So the relationship has continued. There's no sort of sour grapes or anything like that. So whilst sad, it's always nice to see other people flourish as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's when you're faced with situations like that. I mean, it's inevitable, right? People move on in life, and things can change, and that's just a fact of life. But I think it's perhaps a testament to your leadership and the skills you've helped them develop, that they feel able to go out on their own and start up their own practice, and also that you are able to maintain a relationship with them. That's a big part. Culture now in companies and is a big thing. And I just touching on what you mentioned earlier about your experience with being employed and before you started the business. I started life in the legal sector. And I was sort of fresh out of secondary school at 16 when you could do that, and I went straight into law, and I was into business, sales, and marketing in that industry. And it's as you'd probably expect, it's quite it's very different to sort of a lot of industries. But one of the main things and one of the big driving factors behind me wanting to start my own business and sort of work for myself, apart from, as I think most MDs do, is having a bit of a screw loose, because I think you have to have a bit of a screw loose to want to do it. But is to almost, for want of a better phrase, sort of put your money where your mouth is, and you have ideas on how you think things should be run and how you think people should be treated and how a business should work, and actually sort of putting that to the test and seeing whether you're right was a big driving factor for me. I spent a lot of time being managed by people that I perhaps disagreed with on quite a few things, and being able to go out on your own, albeit in a completely different industry, but still the same, work as it were, has been a real, it's been a test. It's definitely been a test. And there are certainly some things that I thought were right, which I now no longer believe are. But I think culture, treating people how you'd want to be treated, and having responsibility to your team to develop them and teach them is a big thing. I mean, that's certainly the values, or the values that we try to adopt here anyway. You touched on there the sort of sectors that you're operating in. You mentioned that you were quite heavily residential up until the recession in 08, 09. And then sort of tried to, or have seemed to have successfully diversified. How do you sort of, from my research, you're quite varied in the sectors that you service. And how do you sort of manage that internally? Do you find that difficult, or is it quite easy to do?
Well, I mean, probably about 70% of our work is still residential, but residential is, it's so broad really. So that can be from, a single private house. It can be private developer, where we're putting 150 houses. It can be housing association. It can be care homes, extra care. It can be supported living. So much, and it's probably the most difficult sector to work in as well. On one hand, it can be a really emotive sector if you're working for that end user who's going to be, living in that accommodation. But the amount of regulations, red tape, planning laws, Building Safety Act now, which maybe we can come on to a little bit. Certainly, we're 8 years post-Grenfell now, and we're really seeing the effects of that in the industry, and quite rightly so, that there had to be change. There really had to be change. So with that, there's a lot of training. There's a lot of continued professional development that we need to do. We need to invest in training for the staff on those particular things, and looking at looking at the regulations. And then I think with other sectors, I think it also then just comes down to competency as well. So whilst I think we're working with the hardest sector to deal with, we're also doing a number of leisure schemes. So we undertake the planning side for a number of paddle courts nationwide, which is a completely different sector, and it was something new to us. So again, it was doing quite a bit of research associated with that, and really picking up. But I think when you're faced with something that you're not sure about, and if you don't feel competent enough to do it, you professionally you have to say, I can't do this. I might know somebody who might be able to do it for you. So it's all about knowing your limitations, really. So, for example, if we just quickly go back to Grenfell. So, one of the things that came out of the Grenfell inquiry was, with the Building Safety Act, was that we now got the class of high risk building. So, anything over 18 metres tall, and it's got 2 residential units in it, and hospital care or what have you. There are certain parts of that, certainly when undertaking the building regulations principal designer role, which is a new role that's also come in, we don't feel competent enough to be doing that particular function on a HRB. So it's all about competency. And one of the big things that came out of Grenfell was the incompetency and the negligence that surrounded that disaster that has now come to light, where an architect's taken on a job, having never undertaken a recladding of a block before. Training was identified by the practice, but never undertaken, and there's some real big lessons to come from that. So it's always a brave business owner that turns down work, but professionally and ethically, we have to if we don't feel if it's right for us. We do a little bit of industrial, a little bit of retail. So we did for a number of years. We did quite a lot of this sort of Papa John's pizza rollouts for them, and we ended up dealing quite a lot with their headquarters in Milton Keynes as well. So there's sort of good varied stuff, and you get some which are a lot more interesting than others, and you get some which stay with you more than others. But again, as a philosophy, as a practice, the client is king, and I think every client, no matter what the size of their job is, they must always feel that their job is the only job you've got, and you must always wrap them in cotton wool and make them feel special. Not so much if they're calling you at 2 o'clock in the morning because they've been thinking out where a particular socket's going to go. That's probably out of order. But it's really important that you keep your clients close, really, and we try and build up a good relationship with them. The better relationship you've got, the the easier it is to have an honest, frank, open conversation with them when something isn't necessarily going right. So one of the proudest things I've got is actually our first ever client is still a client now, so 20 years later. Client retention and referral is probably our biggest marketing, really.
I think the same principle applies to what you mentioned about staff retention, and that's almost the biggest form of, or the most important form of recruitment, as it were, is retaining the people that you want to retain. And your best form of marketing is retaining your clients, the ones you want to retain, right? And what you mentioned there as well about sort of, client management and that side of the business, which I imagine you're the same as me in the sense that a large part of what I do is client management and making sure that everyone's happy, that things are on time, that if there are any issues, they're being dealt with in a decent period or whatever, and they're actually resolved. And going back to what you said there about sometimes your client will come to you and say, can you do this? And we obviously, all of us absolutely should have a professional obligation sometimes when it's not within your expertise to say no, and being confident enough to do that and having a relationship where you can do that is always healthy. But some of the best relationships that I've built with clients for this business have been where we've had an inquiry and someone will say, we're looking to do this, can you help? And the conversation is that, I obviously don't want to see work go out the door, but this isn't within our expertise. I know someone or two or three or four people, or whatever, who I can refer you to, but I can't hand on heart say that we're going to be able to service you to the level that we'd like to. And that in itself builds trust. And so I think it's important, sometimes to be able to take a step back and have the confidence to do that, to just say, do you know what? This isn't for us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the big things with the RIBA that is sort of really being pushed at the minute is that ethical awareness of what we do as architects, and why are you, as an architect, who are you representing? And it's being true to the ethics of yourself and also code of conduct and things like that. So, for example, if a developer comes to us and they've got a site, it's got some nice ecological value to it. It's got a couple of big trees in there. They come to us and say, Chris, I need to put 30 houses on it. It's going to make me, it's a good sales value area. I'm going to get a little bit of profit in this one. Those trees are going to have to go. And actually, I've been looking at a new construction technique. It's not the most eco-friendly. It's quite carbon heavy. Ethically, what do you do? As a business owner, it's like, right, great, I've got a 30-unit scheme. I can do the plan, I can do the technical drawings, I can do the BRPD, you're thinking, right. But ethically, it's really challenging. You think, right, you shouldn't be using this form of construction. You shouldn't be developing on ecologically rich areas. You've got some trees there that, oh, whoops, the bulldozer knocked down. It's ethically, all of these things are red flags, and we need, as an industry, if we're faced with something like that doesn't, makes it just strikes us as wrong. Or if you were to ask your family, what would you do in this situation? Am I doing the right thing? And they go, no. Then absolutely they're reinforcing your ethical standpoint. And we should say no. As an industry, we should say no. There'll always be somebody who will do it for a few quid, but we must say no. We must state the reason as to why we're doing that. Ethics is a really big thing. Ultimately, we need to be, what we do as architects and as designers is for the public good. It's not for the good of the developer or the good of us as an ego and stick a little medal on our chest. It's for the public good. It's what we're doing. If we're developing a site, are we leaving it in a better place than the way we found it? And I think that's, we've been faced over the 20 years several times where we've sat across the table from somebody. It's a great opportunity, and we've had to go, no, don't feel comfortable doing it. And again, it takes a brave business owner or a project architect to go, no, I'm not comfortable with it. But you have to. You need to always be aware of why you're in this industry and who benefits from it in the end. And developer are long gone, but the public will still be there, and public will still be using that space. So
it should be first and foremost, and it's important, I think, to always be asking yourself that question, because I think it keeps you level and it stops you going down a road that you perhaps didn't envisage going on, you probably don't want to go down. And, you know, maintaining that credibility and having that culture within the business that this is how we operate, and you know, making sure that that's throughout. In terms of like your project pipeline at the moment, what sort of stuff are you doing right now?
So right now, we've got a number of paddle courts on our books at the moment. We've got a number of resi sites for housing associations that are on site or just about to go on site. Around Worcestershire, we've got a very nice one-off house elevated over the River Severn, which is currently in for planning at the moment. That's what we're really looking forward to seeing on site. We've got sort of a good sort of varied mix at the moment. We're doing quite a lot of building regulations, principal designer work as well at the moment, which is, I think I mentioned before, it's a fairly new thing that's come through with the Building Safety Act. So, you know, you've got the CDM principal designer on the health and safety, and then you've got the building regulations principal designer. And there's been a sort of a period since the launch of the Building Safety Act where there's been some real confusion as to what this role is. People are confusing it with the CDM principal designer role, and there's been a lot of engagements with clients really just trying to educate them into what that role is, and it's a statutory role that they need to appoint. You know, a lot of clients will go, it's just another fee for you for doing a thing, but no, there's a real cause and effect as to why we're doing this role now. Some architects aren't performing the task because, again, they don't feel confident enough to do it. We've had to undertake quite a lot of training to get to the point where we can demonstrate our competency to the clients. So we've got quite a lot of that on the books at the moment, and we've got one of our colleagues at the minute is going through her RIBA Part 3 examinations in September, and again that's something that they're sort of really concentrating on. It's the principal designer services and making sure that, you know, the students coming out fully versed with what that role is, because at the minute there's still some confusion in the industry about it. So the jobs we've got single house, and probably the biggest we've got is we've got one in near Stoke-on-Trent, which I think is 220 units on site. So we sort of anything in between that. And then we do master planning up to, I think the biggest master plan we've done, I think, is up to about 5,000 units. So all things in between.
Yeah, that's the impression, as I sort of mentioned when we first started, that you know, the areas you're servicing are quite varied, and obviously with the regulation that's in place now, and the training requirements that you know architects are subject to for obvious reasons, it must be a lot of your time must be spent keeping on top of regulations, what's required, you know, accreditations, etc., etc. It's I mean, that's a thing in itself, right? Then there's running the business and actually doing the work.
Yeah, we've got I've got an operations manager, which is absolutely priceless, really. So, you know, we've sort of developed training matrices that we're highlighting, the ones that are mandatory for us to do, those that we'd like people to do. And that's not just about regulations, but that's also about sort of office training as well, whether it's simple, you know, setting up your seat and your screen so it's in the right position, to manual handling, but also things like well-being, mental health, things like that. We offer a program where staff have access to therapy and counselling if they need to talk to people. So that mental health well-being it's such an important part of. It's just such an important part of society now, isn't it? And making people feel looked after and listened and be understanding is really critical. So the training matrices that we've got, don't just focus on, okay, we need to do some more work on approved document B or, Building Safety Act, but also other things which are part of our day-to-day life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the care and well-being of people, staff, and your responsibility as employer is at the forefront more than it's ever been. And it's something that, if like you said, if you're already leaning that way in terms of the culture you want to implement and the style of leadership you want to adopt, then you're halfway there because you're already cognizant of it. It's something that. Ultimately you want to look after people, but there is also the business side of it where it does improve productivity and harmony and all the rest of it. So it's certainly something that every business should be considering and implementing. In terms of just sort of moving on to the industry, and you've touched on various sort of things there in relation to regulations and the need to be in the know and trained, etc. What are you seeing? I imagine that one of the things that you're going to highlight is planning, but what are you seeing as the main things that are holding you guys up, perhaps, or particular pain points at the moment that are sort of not helping your workflow?
Well, planning is a constant, to be honest with you. And I think every new government that comes in, they're going to sort out the planning, aren't they? That's their mantra when they're big five. They're going to sort the planning process out. There's a new MPPF out now, but will it be fixed? I doubt it. We've got local authorities which are there's some very, very good planners out there, but they're under-resourced. They don't have the funds to bring in new planners. They're totally snowed under, these planners. So whilst we're constantly whingy about planners, it's not necessarily them. I think it's the tools that they've been given to work with. Notwithstanding some are worse than others, but it is difficult. Planning is difficult. Again, we try and build up a rapport with the planners where best we can. We heavily encourage our clients to go in for pre-application discussion with the planners. So when an application reaches their desk, hopefully it's a bit more of a tick box exercise, that we've actually had the difficult conversations prior to the application going in. And it's patient. Sometimes you just need to be patient and work it through as best we can. So it is a problem. I think it's a case of managing clients that, when you're appointed, say, right, I want to get in for planning straight away. Yeah, we'll get planning in 8 weeks, won't we? Again, manage that expectation. You won't get planning in 8 weeks. You might get it registered in 8 weeks, but so it's making sure that we manage their expectations, and then you don't get the sharp end of the client saying, you priced this, you promised that.
What do you think's the resolution to that in terms of the planning procedure as it is? I mean, do you think that there needs to be complete reform, or I mean, how do you even begin to approach something like that?
I mean, it is resource, isn't it? So a number of years ago, with building regulations always used to be with local authority, and then they brought approved inspectors in, and suddenly that made it more commercial. Being more commercial made it work a little bit smoother. I think that offering of, not all schemes, but a certain band of developments, even if it's minor up to 5 or 10 units or something like that. Maybe we bring a sort of an approved planning person in who can help to unclog that pipeline that's going into the local authority council offices.
Yeah.
Which means that they can possibly then concentrate on some of the bigger schemes and actually give the bigger schemes, the resource that it needs. So I think it needs to be unblocked somewhere, and I think taking some of that work off the planners would potentially do it. We could say let's throw more money at the local authorities, but
that never seems to work, does it? Really,
it never seems to work. There's no silver bullet with it really, but it worked on the building control side of things, and I'd like to see that happen. I think just to say it might just be a small, say up to 5-10 units. I think it could work. Because if you've got a planner who's looking at a 200 unit scheme, but they've got 25 kitchen extensions they also need to look at. A lot of them take similar time. That process of going out to consultation and bringing all the consultation responses back and uploading everything to the planning portal, it all takes time. So releasing some of the pressure to the local authority plans, I think they would be grateful for.
Yeah, I can imagine. And one of the things that you said there is a point that I wanted to mention is, there seems to be a bit of a misconception that if it's a smaller application, then it would take less time than perhaps a bigger one. Whilst I imagine that there is, some occasions where a bigger one may require a bit more input, but ultimately the process is still relatively the same. So 25 kitchen extensions don't take. In total, don't take the same amount of time as a planning application for a 200 dwelling development, and I think that's often a misconception. I think a lot of it is in the efficiency of your process, and resources obviously a big thing as well. And I find that I think it's the same across all sort of local sort of governmental bodies or local authority or whatever. I'm just not sure that the most efficient processes are put in place, and I think that if some time was spent on looking at on stripping back what's being done, how it's being done, how work's being allocated, what resources doing what, I think and optimizing that, I think that would definitely free up some efficiency and capacity for people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think other pressures is the lack of skilled trade we've got. And if we're getting these planning approvals, they're going onto site. Is the quality failing as a result of there's lack of apprenticeships, there's lack of training. Kids these days happier to make a few quid on TikTok rather than actually going out and getting an apprenticeship and making a difference. My son, who's 19, has recently got into the trade. He'd been sort of labouring on some of my sites since he was 15. He's an electrical apprentice and absolutely loves it. And everybody who talks to him says, "You'll never be out of work. You'll never be out of work." There's always a need for trade, and it's so sad to see the lack of those trades coming through, and the skills associated with it, really. And I think that's probably the next problem we've got. I mean, again, the government delivering housing targets, great. We're going to deliver so many houses. Great if you've got the skills to do it. We haven't got the skills to do it. So how do we address the skills and bring them through?
I think what you say there rings true. That there is obviously the social element, right, in the sense that this lifestyle that's being portrayed by various influencers or whatever they're called, that you can just go on TikTok and be a millionaire by the time you're 25. I'm sure that's possible for some, but it's a very small percentage. Key to this, I think, and I think this would help us a lot, in the industry that we're in, is it's the way it's being portrayed and the message that's being given is being marketed in a way that makes it very appealing, and it's an easy option. I think where perhaps construction as a whole, if you could put it that way, is struggled is, one, I think people just think it's, if you're in construction, then, not that there's anything wrong with being a bricklayer, but people just think, oh, you're either a bricklayer or a plumber or an electrician, and that's it. But when it's not, there's so much more to it. And I think that when, like with any job, career, whatever, there's always an element of plying your trade when you start, but trying to get across to people that once you're in the industry, whether you've got trade behind you or whatever, and what that opens up to you in terms of where you can go and the variety of different roles that are available to you. Construction is more than just the hands-on as well. There's so much to it, and I think that I don't know if it's a problem with the sort of education system. It's not being, I say pushed, but being explained in a way that makes it appealing and explains it in a way that gives the full breakdown of what's available, or if it's just this social problem that I talk about that you mentioned in relation to become a millionaire by you're 25 by posting a couple of TikToks. I'm sure it's a mixture of those things, but one of the things, just to expand on that, one of the things that I've always found strange about this skill shortage and about the lack of sort of younger people coming through is that construction, for me, and I think this is still right, has always been sort of one of the kingpins of the economy. If construction is flourishing, if you see cranes everywhere in London or whatever, then generally speaking, the economy is doing well. And construction is in your face wherever you go, whether you're walking down the road or in your car or whatever, it's there. So I've never quite, and I still haven't, and part of this podcast and why we're doing this is to sort of try and plug those gaps. But I've never quite understood why there's a big gap between it being, such an integral part of the economy and an important, role in sort of general day to day, it being very visible to everyone, but then there being such a small uptake at a sort of college level. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, you're right. Construction, when it's recession, they're first into the recession and they're last out, aren't they? So actually, when you see the tower cranes, we're doing all right. When they stop swinging, not so much. But it's hard work, isn't it? A day grafting on site, it's hard work, and when you're starting out, you're not getting a lot for it, and maybe it's that, whether they just want that instant hit, don't they? Work as little as you can for the maximum amount of money, and that sort of flies in the face of it, really. But long term, it's building a career, and where those skills can then lead you. Whether you then go into development, do your own building company, or and also dealing with, lots of different people, lots of different trades, lots of different ages, how you're mixing with people socially, how you can talk to other people, how you are in different situations, putting them out of their comfort zone. I think that there's some really good life lessons that can be learned when you're on the site. When I first graduated as an architect, I designed a new standard Gloucester County Cricket Club, and I was a newly qualified architect, so I was like a cockerel strutting around. I was like, oh, look at me with my bits of paper and things like that. And I was walking around the site, and there was a bricklayer at the top of the stand, and he goes, "Is that the architect?" And yes, my fine fellow, yes, I'm the architect. And he basically told me in no uncertain terms that the detail I'd drawn, he needed to shove that where the sun didn't shine, and he brought me down such a number of pegs, I must admit, and he was just like, yeah, okay, I've got to think about not just how pretty that drawing looks, but actually you've got to think about the guy with the trowel in his hand, and the brick and the trowel, and gone, right, I'm following this drawing, what he's drawn doesn't work. So that was an interesting little life lesson for me, that was.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think as well, you mentioned there about, getting a trade behind you. I think if you start there and understand the true sort of mechanics of how things actually work on the ground, and have that understanding, when you then look to progress in the industry, whether depending on whatever avenue it is you want to go down, having that core understanding of actually how things turn out in reality will help you so much more as you climb that ladder.
We do encourage children, school leavers, those thinking about architecture to come into the office. So even if it's just to sit down with a cup of coffee and go, right, what do you want to know about what we do? Or come work here for a couple of weeks. Give them ideas of what software to be using. If they're going for an interview at university, some of the things that they'll possibly be talking about, and because it's a long time studying, and I was never going to become an architect, so I sort of fell into it really. I when I was in fifth form, I don't know what level that is now, what year that is, year 11, year 12, I don't know. I'm showing my age out anyway. I was like 16, I was playing a lot of sport, I just realised that the girls are quite interesting. So I scraped through my GCSEs, and my dad was the head of construction at a local technical college, and he just said to me, he said, right, there's no way you're doing your A-levels because you'll flunk them. Said, why don't you come and do a construction course? So I did an OND in construction, basically so he could keep an eye on me. In the meantime, I was just like, right, what am I going to do? I think I want to join the police force. So I applied to join the police force, and my parents, obviously looking back now, didn't want me to join the police force. So they kept encouraging me to sort of stay in the industry, and I did quite well at the OD, and I really enjoyed it. And said, right, I'm going to join it. Now my dad would say, if you think of joining the police, you'll get much better promotion if you got yourself a degree. Why do you go and get yourself a degree? And so, what would you like to do? I love drawing. Well, you've been doing technical drawing in your own day, so what do you think about architecture? So I ended up doing architecture for 3 years, and it just got me. It got me. Architecture is one of those things that you've got to be passionate about. If you're not passionate about it, you get found out very, very quickly. And that's one of the things I talk about with when the students come in. You can always tell an architect walking down the street because they're the ones who are doing this.
Yeah.
They're the ones
Head on a swivel.
Yeah, and they're the ones stopping and then just touching a building and just seeing what that material feels like. Whereas everybody else is walking on the street on their phones, and they're not looking at anything. It's taking in your surroundings and how it makes you feel in those surroundings. So, that we sort of really encourage, the wannabe students who are coming through the doors, that it needs to grab you. And yeah, it's so it got me. I never joined the police force, but and again, for anybody listening who's sort of thinking about architecture as a career, it's such a rewarding career, and again, I've got a couple of jobs. I know we're maybe a little bit short time, but it's the emotive jobs that stay with you. It's the jobs that you design that have made a difference to people's lives. We did a scheme in Worcestershire for a couple. The wife had COPD, and the house she was living in, it was basically shortening her life. The quality of the environment she was living in. So we ended up designing and constructing a passive house. So it was fabric first, thermally very, very efficient. It was done with a SIP system, so the air leakage was really small. It had an NVHR system, so with filters, so it meant that the pollutants in the air, the dust and things like that, were were really, really low, and the outcome of us drawing something, prolonged their time as a husband and wife together. So it's those emotive schemes. We've done another one for adults with autism and sort of quite extreme neurodiverse characteristics, and again that was a real special job, which really rewarding for the soul, really. And it's those things that I think is quite difficult to get anywhere else, really, that there's something you've drawn has made such a difference to somebody.
Yeah, and it's also, I think, in a world that is very digital and on behind a screen, I think there's a lot to be said for having something that's tangible and saying, walking down the street and saying, I did that. You can touch and feel that it's real, I mean, we get it's in a different way, but, in what we do, a large part of what we do is design. And, I remember a job we did for a leisure company where we had to redesign. Basically, they went for a rebrand, in short, and we had to redesign all of the branding for each of their individual parks, sort of holiday parks, had a couple of farms and stuff, but all based in the UK. And we did basically the logos, right, the signage that goes on the front of as you drive in or whatever. And I remember taking my son to one of the farms, because it's not too far away from where I live, and just driving in and seeing this big signage with all of the stuff that we designed, all of the the typography and the logo and all of the various different bits and bobs, and just saying, I did that, or we did that, and there's something to be said for that, I think. And I think that people forget that there is a real kick. I mean, maybe you got to be a certain type of person, right? Who knows? But I think that should be definitely a consideration. Maybe anyone listening that that is you get a big kick out of that.
You absolutely do. You really, really do. One of the hardest challenges is when you've designed something and you think it's going to work in a particular way, and you maybe with houses or something like that, and then you go back maybe 12 months later and you visit that property, and you just go, oh, what have you done?
What have you done to my creation?
You can't say anything, but you think, oh, that furniture looks dreadful. Oh, that colour and that wall, you just shouldn't have done that. But you've just got to smile and go, oh yeah, lovely, yeah. So it's always take the photographs before the end user goes in, because But that's the thing about design, isn't it? Everybody's got a different idea, and what's great to somebody is terrible to somebody else. So. And that's the fun of it. Ask 3 architects for an opinion on, what a brick looks like, and you'll get 100 different answers.
Yeah, that's it. Very subjective, which makes it quite a difficult service to offer, I suppose, because we've worked with clients where that you get a brief from them. This is what I want. You produce concepts based on their brief, and they say, oh no, I don't like that. What about this? And you're thinking, that's never going to work. And it's not going to work because of your experience and your instincts and all the rest of it. But, you have to go through that process of explaining why and maybe even showing them why. But, it's why we do it, right? It's well, I enjoy it anyway.
It is. I mean, I think we offer 3D modelling and CGIs as part of our offering. And it's becoming more and more and more important now to be able to show to clients how that end product's going to look, for them to understand, what they're going to achieve. Because a lot of people can't read a 2-dimensional drawing. So as soon as you put something into 3D, bang, it's there.
Well, it improves the process. I think it speeds it up, and it stops that or reduces that back and forth with, oh, I didn't expect that. If you can see it for someone that's not in the industry and perhaps doesn't have the skill or whatever you want to call it to visualize something, when you just show them this is it, it just speeds up that whole process. So just looking to the future. So what lays ahead for Zebra? What are your ambitions moving forward?
I think it's Well, I think one of the big regulation changes coming up this year is the future home standard, which has been sort of talked about for a number of years, and we always seem to be about 3 or 4 months away from it coming in. So we're still 3 or 4 months away from it coming in, and I think that's going to be an interesting time. It's trying to be ahead of the curve on that one. Again, looking at the training, it's really moving houses towards a more passive house type. Energy efficient. We're taking the carbon emission down 75-80%. So it's building regs, is sort of easing us into that. So we are getting used to that. But again, it's the training, it's advising clients who come to talk to us about a new scheme now to say, this is coming in. A lot of clients now, especially the sort of one-off clients, sustainability is very much, a thing that they're talking about. So they're probably easier than, the small regional house developer who wants to 30 units, bang, sell and go off, do the next one, where it's on a little bit of a shoestring. So that's probably in the short term something that we're going to need to be really sort of on top of. And then as far as I think the sort of the future of Zebra, I think it's carry on doing what we're doing, not to get complacent. I don't think. Looking at branding, and getting it out there, keeping that refreshed. I think a couple more appointments, I think, in the office is probably needed. We are looking for a couple of people at the minute, but what we're finding is the quality isn't probably quite where we want it to be. Personality is really big in the office. Because we're a small team, we need people to sort of drop in and gel, have a really good sense of humour, have a bit of crack, work hard, play hard, and that's sort of really, really important. So, yeah, we're looking to build a team by a couple of people. I think we've been sort of 10, 12. It starts to get a little bit difficult to manage at that point. Potentially gets a little bit cliquey. So, I think if we get to 9, 10, it's a really nice size to manage. So yeah, it's really just sort of keeping doing what we're doing, and most of all, enjoying it. Really, got to do it with a smile on your face. Life's too short.
Well, it sounds like, from speaking to you today, Chris, it sounds like you're enjoying it, and you still you've obviously got a passion for it, which has definitely come across. So that's look, if you've got that, then for me, you're 95% of the way there.
I think so.
I think, yeah. So, yeah, well, Chris, I mean, unless there's anything that you want to sort of address, bring up or anything.
No, I don't think so. I think we sort of covered all the sort of main ones, really. I think, yeah, we touched on Grenfell and the outpouring of, it's just been massive for the industry. And it's been shameful for the industry, really, what's come out of that. And there was a quote from one of the architects who was on the panel it was a panel member on one of the inquiries, and I will just read it out because it's really important. And it says, if you work in the construction industry and you do not feel the weight of responsibility you have for keeping people safe, then you're in the wrong job. And I think that's a really important lesson to come from that. It was that complacency, that negligence, that lack of accountability, people thinking that somebody else is doing that job, so I don't need to do it. It's horrendous, absolutely horrendous. But whilst I was ashamed to be in the industry that made this happen, I think I'm now proud to be in an industry where we've seen this massive change with this act coming through that will hopefully mean that something like that never comes to light again.
Absolutely. And I think from what you've said today, in the sense of you're very aware of your responsibilities and how you're training your staff. You're doing your bit to make sure that these things like that don't happen, certainly under your watch. And I think that's as much as any one person can do. And learning the lessons from the tragedy. I think it's important that we all take time to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the RIBA are taking it incredibly seriously. They're now doing a mandatory health and safety test for all chartered members. That is a 40-question test that everybody has to take. Once you've passed it, lasts for 5 years. But it was this year it was voluntary, but they've made it a mandatory requirement now. So, health and safety is absolutely at the forefront of the RIBA's thinking. And it's not just of how we design, but how we look after ourselves. If we're going on a site survey, we're going on site inspections, talks about lone working, all those little things. So it's health and safety as a whole, not just we can't specify that cladding material anymore. So it's really good to see that our governing body are really sort of pushing, so it closes the circle.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, thank you very much for your time today. I've really enjoyed our chat. It's been really insightful. And I think, I certainly have learned a hell of a lot, and I hope that our listeners have too. So thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience.
Oh, you're very welcome. I've really, really enjoyed it, Jason. Thank you.